content is the most important thing for public speaking, sermons, lecturing, any of those sorts of public communication. And the way I used to really tell students to do it was to manuscript it, to write it out. And that way it's well thought out, it's well prepared. And if you practice it a couple times, you read it through, people really won't even know you're reading. It's a way to make sure the content is well done, and you can do it in a way that you can't mess it up. You read it aloud. That's what the president does. They have a team of speechwriters write a speech, and then they put it on a teleprompter and the president delivers it. However, if you're in smaller settings, you're a regular teacher or speaker, you're in a classroom, you don't have the luxury of being able to manuscript, write out sentence by sentence everything that you would need to communicate. It's just not really possible. And so that's something to think about. I can only use an outline or just some headings on a PowerPoint or bullet points. And that's often the advice to teachers and professors, that they shouldn't manuscript everything. They should have enough, they should be prepared, but then they can deliver it in an improvisational way. The other thing, obviously, that you can do when you're not just reading a lecture is you can actually interact with your classroom audience, for example. And that is really the second thing that's really, really key in all communication, even if you're doing a lecture or monologue or speech, is that you must know your audience. So you actually connect with your audience in a classroom by asking questions, by starting where your listeners are at and bringing them content that moves them on to the next stage. So you may more or less introduce a topic and say, where are you at? And learn from them. And then you share further content to help them to the next stage. Now, you may not want to do that if you're speaking to a huge group of people and you don't want to be interrupted. That's not the culture of the speech you're giving, whether it's a sermon or a public speech. But you still should truly know what your listeners are thinking at the beginning of your speech. So you'll introduce the topic, and then hopefully at the beginning half of your speech, you're going to say, this is probably what you're thinking about this topic. And that should be accurate, because you should have spent time with the regular listeners, the typical listener that you are trying to address and connect with, so that when you say, this is probably what you're thinking, that's accurate, that the people sitting there actually think, yeah, that's accurate. And so you actually didn't, in the actual speech itself, ask them, because you've done the work ahead of time. But that's just crucial, connecting with the audience. Third thing I want to talk about is the delivery and our hesitation and self-hatred about it. A lot of people have a fear of public speaking. A lot more even will do it, but then they cannot stand to watch themselves on video afterward. They're just mortified about it. But the literature shows that actually you can be a very good communicator, because content's the most important thing. Even if you just read a dry lecture, that can be effective in communication, and teachers who read their lectures can actually be quite effective. And similarly, people who improvise and then they have some filler words, the ums and ahs, those sorts of things, those actually don't interfere that much with communication. They sometimes actually help, and that people don't even notice them, and they actually indicate a new topic is coming, those sorts of things. There's these unconscious ways we process information. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up about the style of communication that we end up using. And so that's my encouragement to you. Content is really important. Know what you're doing, prepare, study, give your time to the substance. And secondly, give your time to knowing your people. Where are they at? And then don't worry so much about the actual delivery, the actual communication of what you're doing.